So percentage is going to appear throughout the entire of your numeracy section in LANTITE, whether that be calc or non-calc. And you may see it in the form of finding a percentage of an amount, converting between fractions and decimals, which will make any of these questions easier, having to do a percentage increase or decrease, calculating percentage change, and then not as common, but probably the trickiest one, is doing a reverse percentage where you have an event that has already happened and you have to go back and find what the price was before a discount or an increase in price, whatever it may be. So let's move on to our first type of question. So we're going to start with a non-calc question. A concert had 52,000 people in attendance. 20% of the crowd were fans of the headline act. So let's say it's someone like Taylor Swift. We have a lot of Swifties. Probably more than 20% to be fair, but never mind. And how many fans of the headline act were there, whoever it may be? So let's emphasize what percent actually means, because that's really key. Percent means out of 100. So if we're trying to find 20%, we're trying to find 20 out of 100. So if we grouped these people, every 100 people we took in a group, we would put 20 of them to one side, okay? And eventually we're trying to see how many would end up on that, let's say, left-hand side if we kept taking 20 people in a group of 100 and pulling them to the left. This also makes it a bit clearer of why we can do some of these calculations, because 20% is 10% plus 10%, which is 10 over 100 plus 10 over 100. So I'm building up your knowledge of fractions already to try and make things a bit clearer, because in order to find 10%, you can just take your number, 52,000, and divide it by 10. But the reason is 10 over 100 simplifies to 1/10, okay? And if you want to find 1/10 of a number, you can just divide it by 10. So let's do that. To get 20%, we're going to find 10% of 52,000, which is 5,200. But we want that twice over, okay? Because we don't just want 10% on its own. We want 10%, 5,200, plus another 10%, another 5,200, to give us a total of 20%, which is 10,400. So the reason I'm emphasizing percent meaning out of 100 so much is because it will help you with other questions, both in this video and in general, when you're trying to convert between fractions, decimal, and percentages. 20%, 20 over 100, 0.20, okay? All of these things will make it easier to do comparison and hopefully help you understand why we can do some of these mental calculations compared to just saying, do this, do that. But let's have a look at another one now where you can use the calculator. Okay, so we have a student scored 18 out of 25 on a quiz, and we want to find their mark as a percentage this time. So let's break down what's going on here. So percent means out of 100, and we've got 18 over 25, which is the same as 18 divided by 25. So this is helpful for calculator input in case you can't find a fraction button, or if we're using a basic calculator, like some of the ones that are going to be on our screen during LANTITE, we don't have a choice. So 18 divided by 25. Fractions are just a good, clean way of writing some numbers that end up having a lot of decimals, for say. So 18 over 25 is not too bad, but if you had a fraction which ended up having lots of decimal points, it's a lot cleaner to write it like this. So this is why we do it. But 3/4 just means 3 divided by 4. 18 over 25 just means 18 divided by 25, which is an important point to understand what's going on. So the key principle here is this. If we have a fraction or a decimal and you want to convert it to a percentage, you just have to multiply it by 100, because again, percent means out of 100. So if we was inputting this into a calculator, we would say 18 divided by 25 if we don't have a fraction button available to us. To change it to a percentage, we would then times it by 100, input this into your calculator, and you will find it 72%. If you also notice that 18 over 25, if you times both top and bottom by 4, you would get 72 out of 100. Awesome, that's great technique as well. But considering we got a calculator, we could just go ahead of understanding what the fraction means and knowing to get from a decimal or percent decimal or fraction, sorry, to a percentage, we simply have to multiply by 100. Okay, next type of question. So this is a percentage increase/decrease question where we start with our starting value, 100%, and it may gain value or it may lose value. So one thing I suggest you do is just make a note of key words within all of your LANTITE numeracy revision. Depreciated is a word which is telling you that it has lost value. When we buy a new car, for example, it normally depreciates the more we drive it. So this laptop that has been purchased has depreciated by 22%. So it has lost 22% of its value. So we need to find 22% of 2,400. Okay. We know by now, hopefully, that percent means out of 100. So we can write that as 22 over 100. We've got a 2,400 here. Another key hint is whenever you're seeing the word of in mathematics, that should be suggesting a multiplication to you. We say 3 lots of 2, that means 3 times 2, okay? The word of is suggesting that you do multiplication. So if we now input this into a calculator, either as such or by using the facts that 22 over 100 is 22 divided by 100, then times, because of 2,400, that will leave you with an answer of $528. Just make sure you're checking the context of the question, because in some questions they may ask you what is the new value. So if they asked us for the new value, we would have to take 528 from our starting amount. But this one hasn't asked us to do that. They've just said how much money has been lost. That's 22% of the original amount, which we have found to be $528. Okay, we're doing well, and I know that it may seem a bit rapid. I will happily break these concepts down in more detail in other videos, but we're kind of going through all of the different questions we can be asked as a quick revision seminar, if you like. So another type of question, a cyclist's heart rate rises from 72 beats per minute to 90 during a training interval. We're after the percentage increase this time. So we're not being asked how much is the increase as a number, because that would be 18. We want to actually find it as a percentage. So the key formula is as follows. Percentage change is difference, so the difference between 90 and 72 in this case, over the original amount, but that's a fraction. So hopefully the times by 100 is making a bit more sense now, because I don't want to leave it as a fraction. I want a percentage change, and to go from a fraction to a percentage, I need to times by 100. So let's plug in our values. The difference is a key word for subtraction, by the way. The difference would be 90 take 72 divided by the original amount, the starting amount. So be careful here, because that's easy to mix up. It's easy to mix up because it's tempting to put 90 on the bottom, but the original amount was 72. But I also need to times it by 100 to ensure that I'm changing it to a percentage. If we simplify the top a little bit, we get 18 over 72 times 100. So we can input that into a calculator as 18 divided by 72 times 100, which will give us 25%. Okay. There'll be other ways of inputting this into a calculator as well, in case anyone's wondering, but I'm trying to break it down into its most simplest format. So we just have one input at a time. If you also notice that 18 over 72 simplifies to a quarter, then that's good as well, because your fraction, decimal, and percentage conversion is strong. But for now, this is enough to get us where we need to be. Last type of question. So this is the tricky question. I'm not saying that any of them are particularly easy, because we're all on different paths of our journey, but this is known to catch most people out because it's a reverse percentage. Maria brought a pair of headphones for $84 after a 30% discount. So why this is different is because this event has already occurred, okay? Keyword being bought, it's already happened. So we're not actually starting from 100% this time in terms of the question, because the 30% discount has already taken place. So we know this is a reverse percentage question as something has already taken place. This $84 doesn't represent the full amount, 100%. In fact, that $84 represents 70% because 100% take away 30% is 70%. So the discount we got already and has already happened means that we're only paying for 70% of the price. So we're starting with 70% in terms of the information we have. 70% equals $84, okay? What I recommend in any question like this is you use something called the unit method. You find 1% first, okay? Because if you find 1%, you can go ahead and find anything you want after that point, really. So we're going to find 1%, and then we're going to use that to find 100%. The reason I'm suggesting using 1% as well is because if you have 70%, to get 1%, you just have to divide by 70, okay? And that works for any number. If I had 56% and I wanted 1%, I have to divide by 56. If I had 37% and I wanted 1%, I would have to divide by 37. So hopefully you're seeing that pattern there, and it makes it a bit easier to help regardless of what the number is. So if I'm going to get to 1%, I need to divide by 70, which means $84 will need to be divided by 70 as well. And once I have 1%, to get 100%, I just need to times by 100, okay? So if I wanted to find the original amount and I had 56%, divide by 56 times 100. If I wanted the original amount and I had 28%, divide by 28 times 100. Hopefully you're seeing a pattern there. But in this case, we want to find 100% when we had $84 representing 70%. So if you type in your calculator, 84 divided by 70, then times 100. There you go. There's a calculator input. Just to make it clear, you will end up with an answer of 120. So the original amount before any discount would have been taken off, would have been $120.